May the words of my mouth and the meditation of my heart be ever mindful of thee, O Lord, my strength and my salvation. Amen. Please be seated. I like pigs. I don't have much experience with pigs, but I like them. I don't know why. Maybe like me, they're a little pink and make a lot of noise, but I enjoy pigs. It's a good thing my homeowners association won't let me have that, because I know the neighbors would complain. I have very limited life experience with pigs. I've taken my children to pet farms, and I've had the occasional parishioner who had a sow in the backyard and had little, I don't know what they're called, piglets. There's another word I was thinking of, but I'll do it. But it wasn't until I got to college that I had an experience with pigs. See, university, probably the age of 19, was probably the greatest year of my life. It's the year I met my wife, Susan. And it was the year that I was the pledge master of Sigma Alpha Epsilon fraternity. That meant that at the age of 19, I could think of all sorts of ingenious, horrible things to do to these poor 18-year-olds who wanted to join our fraternity. And we had all sorts of, I think it's illegal now, but it's not called hazing, it was initiation rites. But we would do all sorts of silly, dumb, slightly foolish, probably criminal things. And one of the things we did, we would have pig wrangling, which was that we had a sort of chapter room. Now, it wasn't as big as this, but it was sort of like that, except the carpet sort of smelled a little funny. And we would get a pig, and the pledges, there were about 30 of them, all 18-year-old boys, would all be down stripped to their shorts. They wore shorts. This is Harvard. This wasn't Harvard after all, so we were decently clothed. And then we would let loose a pig into the room. And the pig had been covered by Vaseline, and around his neck was tied a little thing. And whoever captured that pig, removed that tag, and brought it to me was the winner. And I don't forget what wonderful thing. Perhaps you got out of having to do something dreadful that day. But to do such a task, you had to get a pig. Well, you know, don't have pigs at the animal shelter. Where do you find pigs? Well, being an intelligent guy, I got in the car and I drove into the country. Actually, Susan and I drove. It was her car. And we found a pig farm. And we drove up the drive, and I'm looking, this is not Green Acres. I'm not going to see Eddie Albert and Eva Gabor coming out of the farmhouse here. This is a some operation, a big commercial farm. As we're driving up, there's this lake, except it's not blue. It's a brown lake, and it smells. It's where all the pig, I learned, all the waste goes. This is a major agribusiness farm. And I finally got up to the office, and I explained my desire for the pig, and the foreman looks at me quizzically and says, if you can catch one, you can have one. And if you want to bring it back, that's fine, but, otherwise, we got thousands here, and you probably want one that's, just about, not quite ready to go to the slaughterhouse, but, if you can catch it, you can have it. And Susan and I finally caught a pig. And I learned you don't chase pigs, you don't wrestle pigs. All Susan did was hold out a little corn cob and followed her and hopped in the backseat of her car. Well, we had our pig rodeo, and no 18-year-old boy has ever been as bright as an 19-year-old my wife, Susan, because none of them figured out the trick how to catch a pig. But one of the things I learned about pigs that day, they're dirty, they're messy, they're stinky, they're very intelligent, they're very noisy, and they're very quick. And 2,000 pigs are a lot of pigs. Now, why do I mention pigs? Well, we have the story of the Gesserine or Gadarene swine. Mark and Luke call it Gesserines. Matthew calls it Gadarene. They're two different little towns just inland from the Sea of Galilee. It doesn't matter which it is. But I want to talk to you today about how to read and study the Bible. How you can have surface interpretations. How you can have various layers of meaning And part of reading and studying and discerning the power of the Scriptures is to peel off layer after layer after layer to find the one that is speaking to you today. Because the layer here may not be the layer here. Now, they're not going to be in contradiction to each other, but they have different meanings and different voices and speaks differently and more powerfully. And where I am today and where I am with the story of the Gerasene swine is how do you survive trauma, crisis, abuse? You know, I hated when people, when I was a new Christian and, you know, things went badly in my life, we'll pray for you. You know, God will provide. Okay, I'm here. I know I'm going to get there one day, but how do you fill in the gap? The story of the Gerasene swine helps you get from here to there. Now, what do we know about pigs? Well, I know they're very slippery when you cover them with Vaseline. And I know that Jews don't eat pigs. So, what does this tell us? We're going to be Bible scholars here. Jesus comes ashore on a lake, and he sees a man cop up, naked, filthy. He's a nut job. He's a schizophrenic. He's possessed by demons. And he has the bits of shackles and chains because he had been chained. Not to protect himself from himself, but to protect people from him. And he comes out of the tombs. And remember, Jews stayed away from places of the dead. These were unclean. This is a guy on the outskirts in the margin societies. He's naked, he's filthy, he's living in essentially a city of the dead. And he comes out and he sees Jesus. And he runs up to Jesus. And he first begins to speak to Jesus in the singular. Me, help me, I. And Jesus responds, what is your name? And it changes to we are legion. It changes to the plural. And what do you have to do with us, Jesus, Son of the Most High God? Jesus, the story continues. The demon is cast out, goes into the swine run into the sea. In a different change of pace, Mark's reading is the longest of these passages. Usually Mark is the shortest. Mark was written for a Roman audience. It's very action-oriented. It assumes things that a Roman would know, and it uses a lot more Latin words than Matthew, which was written for a Jewish audience, and Luke, which was written for a Gentile or Greek audience. Different audiences. Usually Luke is the long one, and Mark is the short one. This time around, Mark is the long one. And there are all sorts of Roman code words popping out here. Now, how do you think, when the Romans occupied or conquered a territory, they settled in for good. They created what are called latifundia, slave-run farms, giant plantations. And these plantations were set up to feed the troops. They didn't go to the local market. They didn't have the commissary ship stuff from Italy. When the Romans went to some place and they were going to stay, they stayed. And they set up satellite farms, worked by slaves, provide the food to support the legions. What do you need 2,000 pigs for in a Jewish country? You don't need them, unless you have to feed Italians. 2,000 pigs are a lot of pigs. This is the number set out by Mark. This is not some this is not some farmer on the side of the hill with this little herd of pigs and piglets. 2,000 pigs is factory farming. That's a big pig farm. And the number is deliberately set out. And if you are a Roman reader or a Latin reader, and you're hearing this for the first time in Mark's Gospel, the Most High God, that's what the demon calls Jesus, the Son of the Most High God. Well, if you would fish into your toga pocket, I don't know if they had pockets, but if you fished into your purse, you pulled out a Roman coin, and you'd see the image of Caesar, and what would they be on that image? The Most High God. The demons are calling Jesus the Son of God in the same language and vocabulary that you call the Emperor God. was the name of the demon. There are lots of Hebrew or Aramaic words for there are a lot of us, a bunch of us, many of us. Let's pick a Latin word, legio, legion. Legion is a unit of 1,000 men. It was the basic unit of the Roman army. And we are legion. So on the surface, on this level reading, this is a political statement. Jesus, not the emperor, is God. The demons are the Roman army that have come to oppress us and destroy us, and Jesus sends this unclean spirit of the legion into the legion's own foodstuff, destroying their military base of operations. On the surface, we've got a wonderful political liberation theology, Jesus. Does that do anything for me? No, not really. I don't really have a problem with the Romans. They don't bother me, I don't bother them. Does that work? Well, it may work for Mark and a Roman audience, but you notice Luke and Matthew, they keep all the same actions and figures, but they sort of drop a lot of the Roman motifs, because they're not going in that same direction. Where they're going, and where I see this coming about, is a discussion of what you do when your life is so screwed up you feel inside like that demoniac, where you are oppressed, where you're possessed. This man, I think we've all been there. Have you ever been in a place where your life is so broken, you've been betrayed, you've lost your job, you've been betrayed by a child, by a spouse, by death, I can go on. And you just feel like it's not going to get any worse. You feel just like that demoniac, naked, filthy, and alone. And you, in that point, see Jesus. And the first thing that happens is that the demoniac recognizes Jesus, and he recognizes the oppression that is upon him. The first step when you are in that place of total loss, and whether you're a victim of the bottle or abuse or whatever it may be, you've got to recognize it and acknowledge that it's real. That's so hard. I've been a priest for almost 20 plus years. And I'm still finding how little I know. I went to we have continuing education. Yes, they think they need to retrain me from time to time. It was on spousal abuse. See, I thought spousal abuse was Bert getting bombed and whapping June by the side of the head. And I could tell because she had a black eye. Well, that is a form of spousal abuse, but that's a rage crime. Spousal abuse is not a rage crime, it's a control crime. It's a process crime. It takes place over time and very rarely pops up in a single blow. It's the total domination and control and destruction of one individual by another. Spiritual, emotional, physical abuse. And most women, men are subject to this too, but women are the vast majority of spousal abuse victims, will try 7 to 12 times to break free before they actually do something. So in my time as a priest, I've had a half a dozen times of people who've actually come to me with spousal abuse, and what that tells me is, if I've had 6 people, that means there are probably 40 other people who I have just been totally blind because they didn't walk into church one Sunday with a black eye. Yet they are under the dominion and the possession of demonic and evil. And the hardest thing for that victim of spousal abuse is to stop and recognize and acknowledge what is going on. Isn't that the first step that we hear about in AA? Recognizing that you have a problem. I don't know if many of you may know this, you may not. Alcoholics Anonymous was started in the 1930s at an Episcopal church. Well, of course, in New York City, of course. New York Episcopalians are all drunks. But but it was started by an Episcopal priest to be non-denominational, to be open to everybody, but it incorporates a Christian worldview of how you recognize and deal with evil. And just as the demoniac had to acknowledge and recognize the evil in their midst, so does the alcoholic have to acknowledge, I've got a problem. Now, AA has 12 steps, and my sermon is only going to talk about 3, because the second step is to surrender. Now, the demoniac knows he's got a problem. He recognizes Jesus, and he rushes to Jesus. Notice that. Jesus was not out looking for him. Jesus was not waiting specifically for this guy to pop his head out of a tomb. If you are oppressed, if you are broken, if you are lost, and if you sit in your hands and close your mouth and close your eyes, it's highly unlikely Christ is going to reach out to you. You've got to reach out to him. And when you do that, you do step 2, which is surrender. Not to the oppression, not to the abuse, but you surrender the issue to Christ. Meaning that I have no power to expel this demon from my mind. I have no power by my own might, all by myself, to push this bottle to one side. I've got to rely on a higher power, a higher strength, which I, as a Christian, know to be Jesus. You surrender the issue to Christ and allow Christ to deal with it. This is not to ignore it. This is not to say it's not my problem. This is to say that it is only with the help of Christ that I will be able to overcome. And Christ healed the demoniac. We now move to step 3, which is the response. What did the demoniac do? He said to Jesus, and we have this in all 3 stories, Matthew, Mark, and Luke. We have all 3 stages in Matthew, Mark, and Luke, even though we don't have Roman bits in Luke or we have them in Mark. But we have this process. His is, Jesus, Master, may I come and stay with you and follow you and start life anew. Who amongst us have wanted to run away from problems, from life? When it gets particularly tough, I get out the directory and look to see if that mission opportunity in Bermuda is still open. I thought when my kids were finished college, life would get simpler and cheaper. No, it hasn't. Sometimes I want to run away. This demoniac, he's been freed from the oppression. He wants to run away from his old life, from his old city, from his old family, from his own people, and start anew with Jesus. I want to do that sometimes, but Christ says, no. Return to the city and let the world know and see you and know that I am Lord. When you run away from your problems, even if you think you've solved them, guess what you're doing? You're just changing zip codes. You're not changing problems. When you allow the pain of their memories and the pain of the past to so drive you that they still possess you, even though it's over, that demon is still there. Christ told the demoniac to go and be the first missionary. Share this love and knowledge and power amongst the world. Oh, I get so upset when I see these things on TV and I hear and witness these prosperity gospel preachers and word faith preachers and these people who say that, you know, if you've got enough faith, you can move mountains and everything's going to be perfect. When I was a hospice priest for 5 years, we called them clients, not patients, but nonetheless, I had 1,200 patients. And one incident in particular I remember is a 5-year-old girl with leukemia. And I'm finally called in at the final hour to be with the family. And the mother and father are there, the grandparents are there, and the local minister, their minister was there, and he was telling them, if you have enough faith, your child will be healed. Well, that child died. Jesus a liar? Are these parents just bad Christians? That their child died because they didn't have enough guts to claim it and name it? Or is suffering going to be the lot of old people in this life? And we have to man up to it. Friends, Jesus Christ does not promise you perpetual riches, perpetual happiness, perpetual joy at all times. The purpose of this life is not to be happy. It is to love and worship the Lord and know that you're still going to suffer, but what you do with that suffering is what makes you more permanent. Jesus Christ, perfect man, perfect God. He was like us in every way, yet he did not sin. He too was just like the demoniac at one portion of the Bible. Look at these plaques in the sign of the Lord. It's the Stations of the Cross, the Via Dolorosa. Who was naked? Jesus Christ. Who was filthy? Who was scourged? Who was covered with blood and bruises and thorns and scars? Jesus Christ. And where is he taken? To Golgotha, the ash, the dump of Jerusalem. Cast as far away from the world as this demoniac was in the tombs of Gadara or Gesera. Christ has been there too. We're not called in this life to some happiness. Some of us will have joy. Some of us will have wonderful success. Some of us will be particularly fantastic in life. Thinking back to that picture of that fraternity party, there's a certain congressman in California. I have a picture of him in his underpants wrestling a pig. I can't wait till he's president. National Enquirer, I've made my mark. It's not going to work that way. Christ calls you to love him, to acknowledge him, to keep your eyes on him. When you're here, when you've been set free from the bonds of oppression, when you've been set free from the pain, when you know that, you know the end is here and joy in Christ, how do you get from here to there? You soldier on, you persevere, knowing that there will come some times in life when the ditch will be that deep, but Christ will be there. He'll help you cut out. There'll be other days when it's just at the mountaintop. The journey at the end is still the same. It is life eternal with Jesus. Friends, in reading the Bible, now there are 10,000 Episcopal priests and there are probably 9,999 different opinions about what this says. I don't care about politics, Roman or American politics. I care about pain and suffering, about how we may find and live a life that is fulfilled. So when I read this passage, I find these historical bits frankly interesting. It's like cable TV. There's some things I watch because they're mildly interesting. But knowing that the path of demoniac is the path that I will take in this life, I think is much deeper. Recognize the oppression, submit to Christ, and respond to his word. The psychologists tell us, there's a very popular fellow named Jordan Peterson who I love watching his, I've read his books, I love his videos. He's a really fascinating guy. He's not Christian, but he's sympathetic to Christianity. One of the things that he said, which I think is so very powerful, he says, if you don't have responsibility, you're never going to be happy in this life. Because you're never going to be able to get out of looking at you. And if all you're doing is looking at yourself, you're never going to find perfection. Narcissists excluded. But you're never going to find it if all you're doing is looking at me. But if you take responsibility for someone else, for your life, for the world, for your community, for your church, for your children, and live a life greater than your own, you will have meaning. Jesus Christ, Jordan Peterson is not saying something new. This is what Jesus Christ tells us. Live for something greater than your own self. Live for Jesus Christ. Go out